Hello, Seiiti Arata. Are you one of those typical internet commentators who loves to point out when a quote or idea isn't properly attributed in some YouTube video? Do you accuse content creators of stealing ideas from your favorite authors without giving them credit? If so, you're making a serious intellectual mistake. Please stop embarrassing yourself. It is important to understand that not every idea or quote needs to be attributed in order to be considered original or valuable. In fact, many of the greatest ideas and insights in history have been built upon the work of others, without giving explicit attribution in many cases. It is not because the creator was trying to be sneaky, or to a certain point becomes impossible and irrelevant to try to attribute every single idea that you're using. Yeah, basically, when it comes to ideas and quotes, it is not always necessary or practical to attribute them to one specific individual. In many cases, the origins of the idea or quote are unclear or disputed. Focusing too much on attribution can be time-consuming and distract you from the content of the idea, the quote itself. It is better to focus on the value of the idea rather than on who said it first. This allows you to make the most of the information and the ideas that you encounter. The true value of an idea lies not on who thought it first, but how this idea is being used. So the next time you're tempted to accuse a content creator of not giving proper attribution, just take a step back and consider the value of the idea, the quote in question. Is it 100% a copy of someone else's work, or is it just a different way to express the same idea? And even if it's based on the work of others, is it being used in a new and interesting way? Don't be so quick to accuse others of intellectual theft just because they didn't give credit where you think is due. There's a significant chance that you're just wrong. It is possible that you are simply mistaken in your belief that the proper attribution was not given. One exception is the case of scientific papers that are published in academic journals. Here, researchers publish their discoveries and everything is cataloged with dates within a system that is really more viable to do searches and make attributions. But here we're talking about normal, informal conversations, not about scientific work. It is quite common for multiple people to come up with the same idea independently. In this case, it would be unfair to accuse someone of intellectual theft simply because they didn't give credit where you think is due. Because ideas don't have ownership. Ideas cannot be subject to monopoly. It is often inaccurate to attribute a quote to a single famous individual, as it is rarely certain that that individual was the first person to make that statement publicly known. In most cases, the origins of the quote are unclear or disputed. When I say something like, whether you think you can, or whether you think you can't, you're right. Well, I could attribute this idea to Henry Ford. But first of all, where exactly is the source of this? Or is this just one of those internet quotes that everybody repeats but never actually saw the real source? Now, what if I rephrase it to say, if you believe you can't, you will not do what it takes. Now, you see, it's basically the same idea, but here it would be a misattribution in this case if I would add Henry Quote's name to the quote. Attributing a quote to just one individual, even if that individual is famous, ignores the fact that ideas are not the property of just one single person, and that many other people may have expressed similar identical ideas in the past, but they simply didn't receive the same level of recognition or attribution. Focusing on attribution steals value from the idea. Being too obsessed with adding names to quotes causes an imbalance. You add too much value to a celebrity and too little value to unknown people. Don't get caught up in the who, focus on the what. For you to really understand the importance of focusing on the idea and not on the person, you can watch episode number 253 of the series Hello, Seiiti Arata, which is about great ideas from terrible people. There's also the following episode, 254, also from the series Hello, Seiiti Arata, about bad ideas from great people. So don't mix the idea and the person who's communicating the idea. In addition, attributing a quote to just one individual, even if that individual is famous, it can cause a false sense of originality and uniqueness. It is kind of a cult to the celebrity. This can obscure the fact that ideas are often built on the works and the contributions of others. Yeah, that's right. Many famous individuals, including artists and writers and philosophers, have borrowed and adapted ideas from others they have built on the work of their predecessors, their contemporaries. And attributing a quote to just one individual can give the impression that that individual is the sole source of the idea, when in fact the idea may have been influenced and developed by so many other people. Attributing a quote to just one individual can give the impression that such individual is the most important one, the most influential source of that idea, when in fact that idea may have been shaped and influenced much more by many other people, including people who are less famous, less recognized. But in addition to all of this, there is also a perverse aspect of adding a lot of quotes and dropping names. That is the attempt to put some lipstick on a pig. Famous quotes don't make mediocre ideas better. Yeah, it is a common writing technique for journalists and authors to include quotes from respected and famous people in their work. This is often done as a way to inject credibility to their writing and make it appear as though they are standing on the shoulders of giants. Yeah, by quoting well-known intellectuals. They hope to give their own work, their own ideas, more weight, to make them seem more trustworthy. This is the case of the student who needs to submit some postgraduate thesis, has never read anything by Kafka, for example, but he knows that the professors on the examining board really like Kafka. So then he Googles Kafka quotes to see which one can fit more or less the introduction of his work. However, this technique can be misleading and manipulative. It is like trying to piggyback on the reputations of others. Just because a quote is attributed to a respected and famous person, that doesn't mean that if you add it in the middle of garbage, it would make bad ideas magically become good. Adding famous quotes does not automatically make all else around more valuable. So in fact, yeah, you as a smart reader should even raise some red flags when there are too many quotes being used. The inclusion of such quotes can sometimes be a sign that the writer's own ideas are mediocre, they need support from others. So it is important for readers to be critical and thoughtful when they are encountering quotes in articles and books. See, just because a quote is attributed to some famous person, that doesn't mean that it is automatically worthy of attention. Instead, readers should focus on the content of the idea itself and evaluate it on its own merits rather than just being swayed by the reputation of the person who's being credited with saying that. Let me give you an example. I could write an article saying that, I don't know, I think that Bitcoin is useless as a tool for storing value. But since I am some unknown person, I have very little credibility, and on top of that, I have no idea about what I'm doing. I don't explain the reasoning that supports my thesis. I will try to borrow it from someone else. And in this case, I would add something like, Nobel Prize winner Paul Krugman said that it is totally unclear why Bitcoin should be used as a stable solution for storing value. See that here, I keep arguing without giving a proper rational explanation. Instead of that, I just put the name of someone who's famous to try to help me. Everything that we're teaching here is basically how you can use your own brain to think more effectively. If you're enjoying this, you can check our Intelligence Arata Academy training at arata.se/intelligence. Copyright protects only one specific creation. It doesn't give monopoly rights to the idea behind the creation. I know that now you might be a little bit confused, thinking, well, but what about copyright? You're not mentioning that. Well, copyright refers to the legal right to control and profit from the distribution, from the reproduction of one specific creative work. For example, one painting, one book, a particular song. This means that the person who creates the work is automatically granted this copyright protection, and nobody else can reproduce or distribute that specific work without their permission. For example, you can think of a painter who has this new idea to create a painting using a specific technique, a certain color palette, to paint a Japanese garden with a lake. The painting produced at the end of that is the copyrighted work. This means that nobody else can go and copy, reproduce, distribute that specific painting without the permission of the artist. However, the idea itself is not protected. The painter doesn't have monopoly rights to prevent other painters from also using the same idea. Simply being inspired by someone else's work does not constitute a violation of copyright. If other painters also want to do the same thing, they want to create their own paintings using a similar technique, same brush strokes, same color palette, they can also go to the very same place, the same Japanese garden, and do whatever they want. They are not infringing the original artist's copyright. However, if they were to reproduce that original painting, the work of the artist, without permission, then of course, yes, then they would be violating their copyright. Copyright protects the person who created something from having their work being copied without their permission. But other people are allowed to be inspired by the same idea and create something that of their own, something similar, without having to give any credit. This is how ideas are made. So in short, you don't always have to attribute every idea or every quote to a specific person. It is not practical, it is a waste of time. Plus, the origins of the ideas and the quotes are unclear, they are often disputed. So even if you try, you wouldn't be accurate most of the time. Just focus on the value, the originality of the idea or the quote, and leave the technical attributions for the academic journals. Not every idea or quote needs to be attributed to be original or to be valuable. Many great ideas and insights in history have been built upon others' work without attribution, so stop accusing others of not giving credit because you're missing the focus on what should be the real value. The ideas, the what of the idea is so much more important than the who. Here is another practical insight that you can keep in mind. Focusing on who said something takes away the value from the idea itself. Let's keep exploring this more. Now I want to invite you to a masterclass on intelligence by going to arata.se/intelligence.